Welcome to the Story a Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy, encouraging you to be a writer today, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie here from Story a Day, and it is time for us to talk about what happens when you get a little bored with your writing routine, the things that have served you in the past. This has come up in a number of conversations for me in the past week or two. So I've been thinking about it, and if one or two people are asking me about it, then I'm sure there are more of us encountering this issue and struggling with this issue. So let's think about it. Writing advice says you've got to write every day, or you've got to write frequently enough that you're keeping the creativity going. Quite often when we get writing advice, it's, sit down and do some free writing or morning pages or hot penning before you get started. Or in my case, I might tell you to write a story a day for a month. And at some point, that routine is going to start to feel restrictive, or it's going to feel like you're kind of wasting your time writing silly stuff. Or you just get sick of hearing yourself blather, especially if you're using journaling. Believe me, I know how that feels. And I also know, after all these years, how it feels to be in the middle of the Story a Day challenge or pushing on towards the end of it, and to be heartily sick of writing these little throwaway stories. Now, the benefits of a practice like this, where you sit down every morning and write morning pages, or even after dinner, whenever you do them, or when you go through a challenge like Story a Day or NaNoWriMo, the benefits are many. You lay down pathways in your brain that say, this is when I write, this is important to me, yes, I can do this, yes, I get the boost after I'm finished. All of those things are good. You get the practice of writing and, expressing yourself on the page. And if you're doing it regularly, even if it's morning pages or nothing that's constructed as a crafted piece of fiction, that practice of expressing yourself and using the turn of phrase that is unique to you, it's all good. These are all good things. The downsides of a routine like this is that, A, you can get a little sick of yourself. You can begin to question why you're doing it. You can feel frustrated if you don't feel like you're making progress. It's something that hits during the Story a Day challenge when you're writing these little stories just to fulfill the daily commitment. And you can be like, I'm never going to use this thing. It's something that you can feel if you've been writing your morning pages for a long time, or if you're writing the same kind of fan fiction all the time, or if you're bored, then that's an obvious downside to this writing routine that you've got yourself into. But it's not a bad thing. It's a downside, and the downside acts as a signal to you that something needs to change. And I would submit that the thing that needs to change is that you're ready for the next challenge. If you're bored with what you're doing, you're ready to push yourself further. Now, you can't just quit. You can't just, there's a danger in writing and many other creative pursuits, which is the shiny object syndrome. And it's a danger in business as well. I mean, you've got to finish things, and you've got to see some things through to the end. You can't just, every time you get bored, change tack. But if you have been doing something for a while, so in the context of a challenge like Story a Day or NaNoWriMo or some other challenge where you've gone along and you've signed up for a fixed amount of time, I definitely encourage you to just keep going and push through the bit where it's boring, push through the bit where it's difficult, push through the bit where you don't want to turn up, and see what that does for you. In a time-bound challenge, you know the end is coming and you can endure it. And that's great practice for all kinds of things in life, including finishing your novel, including finishing the edits that your publisher sends you. Knowing that you can slog through the difficult parts is great. But if you are really finding that this is not doing anything for you, and it's an ongoing commitment you've made to yourself to write morning pages every day or write a story a week or whatever it is, that's when I think that you need to consider whether you're ready for the next challenge. And stay with me for a moment. If you can close your eyes, don't do this if you're driving, but if you can sort of visualize these things as I mention them and just gauge your emotional response to these suggestions I make for ways that you might challenge yourself, you might be ready for the next challenge. How about if you've been writing for a while and keeping it to yourself, how about showing it to someone? Showing it to another writer, joining a critique group, going to a writer's group, going to an open mic. How about giving up your morning pages? Not giving up writing every day, but giving up the sort of hot penning, journaling, I'm going to write whatever comes. How about deciding to write a bunch of outlines for stories or scenes if you're working on a novel? How about writing letters from your characters and seeing how they feel about things? How about writing short stories based on your character's childhood and finding out what their damage is, what their internal issues are? How about if you've been completing or working on crafted pieces, how about submitting them? How about researching some markets that might be interested in the kind of stories you're writing? How about putting a date on when you'll finish this project and making it concrete, making it public, maybe giving yourself some kind of incentive, either a reward or a punishment. You've all heard of that thing where you write a check to a charity you hate and give it to someone else and say, if I don't fulfill my commitment, then mail the check. How would you feel about doing something like that? Putting a deadline on your big project, your big scary project that you're stuck in the middle of, and actually finishing it? What if you actually start submitting? What if you start looking for agents? What if you call this project done and start writing the next one while you're doing that? Which of these things not only seem appropriate to the stage you're at, but which of these things really scared you? Which of these things kind of gave you sweaty palms when you thought about it? It might just be showing your work to someone for the first time. That's terrifying, sure, but you will get so much support. If you find the right people, if you go to your family, they'll say, yeah, it's great. If you find the right people, if you find other writers, and you go to them and you show your work, they'll say, I love this line. If you find a good group, they'll say, I love this line, I'm interested in your character, and they might say things like, oh, it got a bit slow here, or I was a little confused about this, all of which helps you to improve your work. Nobody's gonna slam your work, and if they do, they're a jerk. It's not their problem, not yours. If you've been writing for a while, I invite you to consider whether it's time for you to start sending it out to publications, or even finishing it. So have a think about what scared you there. And let me give you permission to mix up what you've been doing. It's served you up to this point, but if you're bored, I understand it's scary to change what you're doing when it's been working up to this point. But if you are no longer inspired by whatever it is that you've been doing and that's been working for you, there are ways for you to take the things that worked, the fact that you sit down every day after dinner and start writing, the fact that you write morning pages in order to lower the bar for your expectation of what you're supposed to be achieving, or the fact that you're writing short stories that are disconnected from each other and don't really matter, again, is lowering the bar for your expectations for when you sit down. If that is what is working about your current routine, save that part and move on to doing something else. If you've been doing morning pages, say, okay, I'm going to write letters from my characters and they're going to be fun, they're going to amuse me. They don't have to hold up the whole weight of a story. So you're still keeping the win tiny. If you've been listening to the podcast, I've been talking about this idea of lowering the bar and setting your win conditions small enough that you can achieve them and build on them. So maybe instead of morning pages, you're writing letters from your characters. They don't have to have a complex story structure. Or have a think about that. How can you take what's working for you now, keep those things? For example, it might be lowering the bar, making it easy to get into the working day. How can you keep those things and yet push yourself in some other area? Or give yourself permission to write in a different way so that you don't lose the stuff that's working, but that you're pushing yourself a little more. So this kind of gets back to the habit stuff that we were talking about in January, and I wanted to check in with you. I'm still digging into BJ Fogg's book, Tiny Habits, and there's a thing in that book he talks about. It's an analytical tool for figuring out if your habits aren't working or if a habit isn't sticking, for figuring out why. And I thought, since we talked about habits in January, you can get like, oh yes, I'm going to do this and I'm going to put new habits in place. And then I wanted to check in with you and see, have you done that? And are they falling off? And are you frustrated? Because I'm certainly, I'm working my way through this book and he makes it seem so simple and I'm still, human. So he has this analytical tool in there. And it occurred to me that writing's a really difficult one to build a habit for, because there's so many challenges. He talks about something simple like eating a healthy breakfast, and the analytical tool is you look at your ability to do it. Do you have the time? How much mental effort does it take? How much physical effort does it take? How much money does it take? And can it be built into your routine? And you look at those and you find the weak link, and then you work to strengthen it. And so I was thinking about this for writing, and the problem with writing is that on any given day, the weak link could be a different thing, right? One day you might have plenty of time to write, but it might be a huge mental effort. One day you might be fired up mentally to write, you might have the time, and yet your desk is a mess, or you don't have the laptop battery has run out, or your pen broke. It could be literally a physical thing that you have to overcome. I think with writing, it's rarely money, except when money claims your time. We have to work for a living, we have to pay the bills. We don't need a lot of money to write. We can use money for things like classes and conferences and laptops and software. We don't really need that stuff. So it tends to be, the money issue, I think, with writing tends to be when, for most of us, tends to be when the money needs eat into our time. And also the other link in the chain is that how you can build it into your routine. And like I say, on a given day, you could solve one of these problems. Like you could create a little nook in your house so the physical problem is solved and you've always got somewhere you can go. You could start to clear off your desk every night before you go to bed. You could write index cards to yourself saying what you're going to work on tomorrow. All of that could be fine. And you could have solved that and strengthened the link in the chain. And then you could get up the next morning and you could be tired and feeling anxious. And now that's the weakest link in the chain and you have to solve that one. So I'm not saying this to depress you and to make you think that this is impossible or insurmountable. I'm actually saying this to give you a pat on the back, to give you a gentle hug and say, this is challenging. And it's challenging, it's ever-shifting sands, right? It's challenging in so many ways. And as people say, if it wasn't, everybody would be doing it. So I want to give you a hug, a pat on the back, a round of applause, because you keep coming back and you keep trying. So I offer up BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits Ability Chain as a diagnostic tool for figuring out what is challenging you today about your writing. Is it time? Is it, what's the weakest link in this chain for you on any given day when you're having trouble writing? You can sit down and think, is it time? Is it mental effort? Is it physical effort? Is it money issues? Or is it something about my routine? And you can look at that and you can be a little more dispassionate. You can stop beating yourself up and saying, I'm terrible and I'll never be a writer. And you can just look at practically what is stalling you and how you can go about strengthening that chain. He also offers a framework for fixing the chain, and it's three-pronged. It's things that you can do from a personal point of view. Do you need to increase your skills? Do you need to get some accountability? Anything that involves sort of personal stuff. He also the second prong of the fixing it part is your ability, your actions that you take. How can you make your actions smaller? If time is an issue, what could you write in 15 minutes over lunch? How could you claw back some time? Can you delegate something in the house? You're probably doing too much around your house. Can you get somebody else to help you out? Or can you find a routine where you do one thing that allows you to get to your desk quicker? And the other thing he offers is a change in context. So that's really, do you have the tools and resources you need to overcome or to strengthen the weakest link in your chain? So if the mental effort of writing is difficult, is there a tool you can use? Can you use the site For the Words to motivate you to get some words done? Can you use 750words.com to get you to that 750 word point where our writing starts to flow? Can you use the Story a Day short story framework to brainstorm and outline the main points of a story and then set a timer for 40 minutes and just blast through it using the tools that I've shared at Story a Day, which you can find at storyaday.org/framework. And you can find that framework and some tips on how to work through a single short story. So that's quite a lot of stuff. I've given you permission to change your habits, change your routine if you're getting bored. I've asked you to scare yourself. What would be the next challenge for you? What's going to keep you writing? And I submit that it's scaring yourself a little bit, doing something that's out with your current comfort zone. That's how we get stronger. That's how we make progress. And then I invited you to have a look at the habits that we were talking about last month. Identify the weakest link in your ability chain every day. If you're struggling, if you're not struggling, ignore all this. Just keep doing what you're doing. But if you're struggling, think about time, mental effort, physical effort, money and routine, and which of those is your weak link. And then think about increasing your skills or your accountability, making the actions that you're taking tinier so that you get that little win, or using some tools and resources to get you over the hurdle that is your challenge today. Writing is challenging, but writing is so rewarding. And I am so thrilled that you're here. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I hope you'll come over to storyaday.org and join in, leave a comment on the blogs, and keep an eye out. The challenge is coming. I know it's February and it seems like May is a long way away, but I'm going to be warming you up all spring and talking about all the ways that you can get ready to do a real big push and find your community and take on that next challenge that you need to keep yourself writing, to take the next step in your writing journey. And I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and do some new things around Story a Day. I started this podcast with just me rambling for about 15 minutes doing pep talks and stuff. I've done a couple of interviews, but they are more of a challenge for me. There's outreach, there's organisation, there's time to edit, all of these things. But I think that interviewing other writers, I think we're all ready to hear some new voices on this podcast. There will still be episodes where it's me doing pep talks and challenges and stuff. But I'm going to be working to bring more voices to this podcast and to the blog to expand our world a little bit and give you new ways to look at things from other people's experiences. So I'm challenging myself. It's a little scary doing that outreach and planning and making sure that everything runs smoothly. But I'm doing it. I'm going to push myself. I'm going to change up the routine a little bit. And I think the content that you will be hearing will be incredibly inspiring. So watch for that. New things coming at Story a Day this year in our 10th anniversary year. But that's more than enough for me for this week. I hope you have a wonderful writing week and just keep writing. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and of course, keep writing.